episode of Reasonably Tactical. Got a couple things we're going to talk about today. Mainly nepotism and egos and how that can affect any organization or your personal training. First, we got to give a little shout out to law enforcement buddy of mine. You know, it's funny that we got people that aren't in law enforcement have hit me up like, man, you're real critical of law enforcement. And it's like, yeah, but everybody in law enforcement I know that's seen it is like, Marty, thank you for saying, you know, the exact same things they're seeing, they're thinking, and it falls on deaf ears at their department. So they they thank me. And actually had a buddy of mine that's out on the road today, made these for us. Awesome little 64 ounce.
Let me see if I can get that up here. I'll hold it up on my cam. So here you go. You can see that he actually laser cut or laser inscribed my name. He inscribed our logo, and I can't thank you enough. This is one of the coolest gifts I think I could have asked for. This, so thank you for that, and thank you to your friend as well.
Yeah,
for
definitely. I know he's out there today, and he'll see this later this afternoon when it hits up. So thank you very much, man. But first, let's also talk about what happened in Chicago over the weekend, real quick, with that flash mob of teens, looting, attacking tourists. When's it going to stop? I got to call out, the parents of those kids. Like, how have you allowed your kids to go this far astray? That's what it boils down to. And then two, the community of Chicago, like, at what point are you going to say enough's enough and start policing up your own neighborhoods, or start electing people that are actually going to take a tougher step on crime?
And that's something that always struck me as odd, is that they're voting for this.
Yeah.
They're honestly voting for this. And I guess, who are we to judge? I live there. I was born there. I moved out of there. And I moved out of there for good reason. Sanity.
I'm just fortunate that we live in the area we live in, where obviously there's no place that's immune from issues, but definitely smaller issues and stuff like that, and hopefully it never gets to that here. But I think, a big benefit we have is we still have, local politicians in the area that wouldn't accept stuff like that type of behavior. It would be put to an end quickly. And for the most part, our local politicians still back law enforcement. The community backs law enforcement. And it's a tough place at times. Like they said, people have said, you're really tough on law enforcement. And yeah, they're my peers. And, just today, a buddy of mine, he was on, and he hits me up because, in our area, everybody's on the same system. So you can see what other people are doing. And I've mentioned it before, when you have a rescue call and a department refuses, response. And the call was for a 55-year-old woman who was having chest pains, and they, no response unless requested.
Unbelievable.
And it's like, you're being requested because dispatch is calling you. And my buddy said, he, looked on scene, there was nothing going on. I totally get if there's priority calls. You're at a crash, there's a fire, a domestic going on, you can't cut loose to go to a rescue call. But if you're sitting there doing nothing, shame on you and shame on the leadership of that department that allows that to happen.
Well, right. And here's the other thing, too, is we're talking about a cardiac emergency. And if an officer could get there faster than EMS,
start CPR that you have to recertify annually here in the state. Get an AED going, something to keep that until the ambulance can get there. If it was your mother, your grandmother, you'd probably want someone to show up that is trained and certified to do that. And for you to deny it, that's shame on you.
Right. And, let's add this real quickly back to our previous episode where we talked about being your own personal advocate. You have to rely on yourself, your resources. I always say this to people. It's not just you. It's everyone in your home. It's your spouse. It's your partner. It's your kids. It's everyone needs to get trained up, because you may be incapacitated and know everything under the sun. You may have to rely on somebody else that needs to know too.
Yep. I totally agree, man.
I think that
pretty much sums it up.
Right into where we were going with today's show. Now, I'm going to start with the definition and see if our viewers at home can guess the word.
Yeah.
The practice among those with power or influence of favoring relatives, friends, associates, especially by giving them jobs or even contracts at that point. Know the word? Nepotism. So you've had this firsthand, seeing it in law enforcement and military. So I'm going to let you go ahead and run with this one because I know this is something dear to your heart and the biggest pain in your rectal cavity that I've ever heard of. So,
well, and it's not just exclusive to law enforcement or military. I mean, you see it with kids' sports. You see it, in any line of work. You see that, little Junior's dad owns the company, and everyone's like, oh, he's a bumbling idiot, but somehow still works his way up. And
now that's no way to talk about a guy that knows about oil and fuel. Okay, he's an expert on energy. Okay.
Yeah, you see where I was going there. But no, I grew up, both my parents were in education. My dad was an administrator at the point, when I was like junior high. He was a assistant superintendent of the district. And I remember people would, oh, he's getting straight A's because of who his dad is. And like, first off, my grades were never even close to straight A's. And actually, it got worse, and it was made clear if I mess up and he gets a phone call, like it's the double whammy when I get home, So, and I did get in trouble fairly often,
I think you probably had it worse because I know some students whose parents were teachers, and that is one thing that they said that they, like you said, the double whammy. It's just horrible.
I'd get it from the principal, and then I knew, when my dad came in, he already got the phone call. So like it was like, oh, here it comes, you just knew it was coming,
right?
And even in high school, my dad was my principal, man. So it was like, you talk about the whole like boy named Sue thing, moved from Beloit to Burlington, much smaller school, freshman year, dad's the principal. It was like, better toughen up quick. But same thing, like I'd get in trouble. I'd see one of the disciplinary principal, take my licks. And then, have to ride home with my dad. Right. He'd lay into me as well,
Oh,
so
I'm sure that was like one of the most awkward car rides ever.
Yeah. It's just like, it definitely did not play favoritism.
Right.
And, then I joined the Army, and I'll never forget in basic training, we had two kids. And I say kids, we were 17 and 18 years old, and one, right off the bat, well, my daddy's a sergeant major in the Guard and blah, blah, blah. And, this little roly-poly dude, he just mouthed off nonstop and constantly put a target on him. And he was like one of the worst dudes. I was like, man, just stay away from me. I don't want to be associated with you, And then we had another kid who, he was quiet about it at first, but then some of the drill sergeants figured out who his dad was. And he was some brigade commander in a mechanized unit. And, they just cowered to this kid, and he could get away with anything. And I was like... Right. If I ever have kids and they join, like, there's no way I would let them tarnish my name, act like that. Like, first off, I would crush them if I found out, and then I would crush anybody that was allowing it to happen. Right. Because they know better. They should know better.
And that's the key, allowing it to happen, and that's the biggest problem.
So fast forward to when I was at the schoolhouse, I finally had some time to have hobbies, so I started coaching youth football. And middle school age, my son was on the team I coached. And, when it comes to these sports, with baseball, everybody wants their kid to be the star pitcher. Everybody wants their kid to be the star quarterback. Well, I didn't want to be associated with that, so I pulled myself away from offense. So that way,
Smart.
He was the starting quarterback, but it was two other coaches dealt with that. For offense, I helped with the line, and I ran the defense. So that way, it removed me or anybody from any, perception that there was favoritism being played. It does better for your child and sets up for success. That way somebody else is dealing with them, somebody else is talking to them, versus you. Come here, I'm protecting you all the time, paving the way for you.
And right, same thing. What we see when people are training here on the mats. One of the things that I made sure to do is if there's somebody that's a friend, I don't treat them like a friend on the mat.
Right.
In fact, I hate to say it, I'm probably a little harder on them. Only because I know what they're capable of on a personal level. And it's just like how your father was when he was a principal, that he was a little harder on you.
Yeah, because you know better.
Right.
And with that, I've had to talk with my son because people have asked him, like, well, you're going to be a Green Beret like your dad. And, he's a legacy. I've spent my entire career as a Green Beret. He's got an uncle that was a Green Beret. His grandpa was a Green Beret. So, like, it's like, well, you're going to, and I've made clear to him, like, hey, if you choose that path, I will help you train up. I will give you advice, but you have to achieve it on your own.
Right.
Like, I'm not making phone calls to be like, hey, my son's coming through. help them out. Like, no, that's ridiculous. You have to make that achievement on your own. And, that's just from the military aspect. But then you look at other aspects where people do that, and mommy and daddy pave the way for these guys, and it's a detriment to any organization.
Yeah.
And I see that with law enforcement. It's awesome to see the like kind of the family tradition where you have generations in law enforcement. That's amazing to me. And you see in the military too.
Oh, absolutely.
But there's a fine line between having that family tradition versus the nepotism of, well, I was friends with your dad.
Right.
I know your mom, so I'm going to allow you to get away with stuff that I wouldn't allow anybody else to get away with. And that just kills morale. It doesn't help you improve at all. And it just sets up for a bad situation.
Exactly. And, we see it in politics too. And
yeah, you have an amazing story about that. Yeah.
So I'm going to try to preface all of this by saying no hard feelings. I'm just being honest. So I have a relative who was appointed to their position in local government. There was a vacancy that needed to be filled from somebody moving up into the current administration, and this position opened up. So her previous position, she was appointed to that too. Now, she may be great at her job, but that's not my place to judge her because I'm not her constituent. Her constituents can only do that. And it's a big problem because now that impacts policy. And now when that's impacting policy, now we're seeing something that we, the people, can't control. And that's, to me, very scary.
Yeah. I mean, that's, and that's at a local level position. Imagine, federal level where you have, appointees. Look at ambassadors. Yeah. I know people, careers at, in the State Department, and then they have some appointee ends up running the show, and, they're just scratching their head like, how is this possible?
We're friends outside of here. Yep. And one of the things that we were discussing, which led to all of this, was how people that get a ride, not all the time, tend to take advantage, and it leads to an inflated ego and an inflated sense of self-worth. So
right, and that's where the major issue comes in, because it's one thing to empower your child or friend to be able to do it, but when you pave the way for them, it develops that ego. And unfortunately, what that leads into is a false sense of ability, because, well, I'm going to get to do this anyways, and it's like, yeah, but you didn't earn it. Yeah. You can't perform. Whether it's some marketing job, in law enforcement, on a baseball team, you didn't perform. You're here because of mommy and daddy. And the thing is, everybody else sees it. Yeah. Everybody else knows it, and then a resentment begins. So then it starts to pull away from the cohesion of that team, of that business.
Right.
And then on top of that, what's even worse is for those individuals, it creates a do no wrong mentality.
Right.
That no matter what I do, well, Uncle Bill will take care of me because, of who I am. And once again, that creates resentment. Everybody else sees it. And in the day, it makes any organization weaker.
Right.
It really does.
The reason I'm laughing so hard is that was my father. His uncle was very influential, and he was able to basically screw up at his job regularly when he worked in his...
He knew he was going to be okay.
Oh, yeah. He had a very cushy city job in the city of Chicago. We'll leave it at that. And I'll just say that he was able to maneuver from position to position a lot faster, easier with one phone call. The relative that I was referencing earlier, ironically, she's on my mother's side of the family, not my father's side. And they were the much more legit side of things. But it's funny because even though it looks that way, there was still that nepotism. Right. The fact that her previous position, she was picked by the governor's administration. And then when this position opened up, she was tapped on the shoulder again. Now, in fairness, again, she ran for re-election, and I believe she got nominated last time I heard. But it's one of those things, again, like you said, it leads to resentment. I have zero resentment. I don't care, but I'm not her constituents.
Right. And this isn't something that can't be fixed. There's always a way to fix things. And I think that the biggest thing is to create a culture of self-reflection. It's something I do with my kids. They're big into sports, And even if they have an awesome game or an awesome performance, I always talk to them afterwards and like, what could you have done better? And make them list at least one thing that, all right, I could have been faster. I could have, I was caught off guard because I wasn't paying attention during this. I could have pinned them faster. My son with wrestling, he'll play around with guys to get his points up, and then he goes in for the pin. And it's like, dude, just end this. Like, what are you doing, man?
Oh, come on, man. He's trying to get those points.
Quarter to 8. I want to go home. Like, let's get out of here. But and I used to do that when I coached football too. Is we'd have our games Saturdays and Monday practice. First thing we did after warm-ups, we all gathered in our huddle and we went around the circle. Everybody had to name something that they can improve on because you're never that good. No. There's always room for improvement. And I remember my biggest come to Jesus moment with that. It was on my 2009 trip, and my team leader and Warrant had gotten an argument, and I could hear him, because my room was right next to him. It's like, mom and dad fighting. So I was like, I'm going to go to the office. And I don't need to hear this. And team leader came in the office, and he was, you could tell he was upset. And I asked him, I was like, what can I do to help? And he looked at me, he's like, Marty, just be honest with yourself. Like, what can you do to better yourself and help the team more? And it really sunk in. I mean, I changed the whole way that I trained, just, everything. And, there are obviously hiccups along the way, but that definitely set me on the path of self-improvement, whether it's physically, tactically, mentally. That was my moment.
And that right there is the greatest learning experience that you could possibly have, is that gut check. And I think a lot of people forget to do a gut check. I have to do it every single day when I get out of bed. I'm always telling myself, I'm good, but I could always be better.
Right. That's where it's, if you can, impart that on people, whether it's your coworkers, your subordinates, your team members, like you'll be unstoppable. If everybody can self-reflect and see what they can do better, and you empower them to achieve those goals, easy day.
Well, right. And that's what makes a good team, is somebody that has a coach that honestly doesn't have an ego as big as, the state that they're coaching in. Right. Like I tell people, a smart leader will put people that are smarter than them around them. A dictator will put people that they could just domino and topple over.
The yes men.
Exactly.
And that's, in the military or in the Army, we have, quarterly counselings, monthly counselings, all that stuff. I know in law enforcement world, we have our annual reviews. In any job, you have some type of, annual review or quarterly review. And I've seen so many places that use it as kind of a check the block thing. It's just like, all right, you did this, you did this, you did this, but it's not really real mentorship.
Right.
It's not a discussion where you're talking about what do you need to improve? What can I do to improve as a leader? What can we do to make our organization better? And, kind of empower people to start taking that. Because if you as a leader empower your people, and they see that, wow, they took my input to make these changes, guess what? That instills loyalty.
Exactly.
People have a sense of ownership of the organization, and they'll work that much harder.
Well, let's briefly talk about how that could apply to the average everyday citizen. I mean, think about when you talk about being your own leader in your home, whoever that may be. Being able to assign tasks to your spouse, to your kids, to all of that is probably one of the smartest things you can do, because let's face it, nobody is the best. No one person is the best at everything.
Usually those people that thump their chest on how great they are, when it comes time to perform, usually not up to par at all.
They fail miserably. I hate to say
it. The people that sit there quietly and just kind of observing, the wheels are turning, and those are the people you probably want to talk to. And hey, what do you think? And just as leaders, young leaders out there, if you're listening to this, like, please use it. Make your organization better. Whatever line of work it is, whatever sport it is, make your organization better.
Like we talked about, don't be a jerk, be a good human. Yeah. And that's really what this all boils down to, is better performance, better people, and hopefully a better world.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so, on that one.
Just kind of close it off with, be able to look in the mirror in the morning, figure out what you need to do to better yourself, and then start taking those steps to make yourself a better person.
I like that. I think on that one, guys, thank you so much for watching Reasonably Tactical.
Have a good one.
See you guys.